Good afternoon or good morning, everyone, depending on where you are in the country. It's right at noon here for us in the middle of the country. And so I'm happy to have you joining us. I'll say this is a little bit of a different presentation that I'm used to giving. Usually it's all about engineering or projects. And so bear with me as I navigate this different kind of a topic. My name is Carrie Bristol-Grull, and I'm the Executive Vice President at AQUALIS in the Engineering Services Division. As we move into this conversation, I first want to give another disclaimer that this is my opinion and my views over a 30-plus year career. This is not necessarily the views of the company, although I don't think it's diametrically opposed to the views of the company either. But I think with that, we'll just jump right in. First, a little bit of myself so that you know who is having this conversation with you. I have spent 31 plus years of my career in stormwater engineering. As a bachelor degree civil engineer, I also am a licensed professional engineer and certified environmental sustainability professional. I spent 10 years, the first 10 years of my career, as a civil stormwater engineer at 2 cities in Wisconsin. Milwaukee is close to 1 million in population, with some of the suburb areas probably more like 700,000 today. And then Brookfield is more on that 50,000 population level. In about 2002, I started a small engineering firm, Stormwater Solutions Engineering, and ran that for 21 years. In 2023, we were acquired by AQUALIS, and that's when I became the Executive Vice President of Engineering Services at AQUALIS. And then in a couple of years back, I also invented a rainwater harvesting device and have a patent on something called Storm Garden. So a little bit of who I am. I'm pretty focused on what I have been doing for my entire career. What I am not, I think, is equally as important. I am not an economist. I am not a business researcher or a journalist, probably is evident as you hear me speak. I'm not a historian. I'm not a psychologist either, and some of that comes into play with what we talk about. And I am not a fortune teller. So I'm not going to tell you what the future holds or what the things will look like going forward, but I'm going to look back on my 30 plus years and see the changes that we have experienced and see how that may play out today. The reason that I want to bring this up is that, within the last 6 months, I think primarily, as I look back over the years, I've heard more of an emphasis. Every conference I attend, every association meeting I attend, it feels like a little bit of a doom and gloom theme. People are very concerned about what's going to happen to the state of our environment, what is happening with our jobs, what is going on with, regulations and things like that. And I feel like we've seen this stuff happen before, and we will see it happen again, and we will find ways to balance the scales and stay kind of positive as we move forward. So I am probably more of a glass half full person. You'll probably hear that a little bit as I speak on things. And I just hope that I can bring you along on that journey to open your minds to kind of thinking a similar way. But certainly keep track of your questions, and we can have a little question and answer at the end. A little bit of who we are as AQUALIS, in case you are not familiar. We are all across the country providing stormwater and sanitary services, from concept and design through construction management, and long-term maintenance. I really love that we are like cradle to heaven. I'm not going to call it grave because of that glass half full kind of mentality, but that we are able to see a project come to fruition with a client all the way through construction and then long-term maintenance, which I feel is pretty unusual and it really helps us to see a big picture perspective. And on the engineering side, we have been focused, from the 2002 mark all the way to today, at the services that you see bulleted here. Everything is really focused on water quality, on stream health, on what's the quality of that water when it reaches the stream, from development, from city right-of-ways, et cetera. And we're doing this for a large diversity of clients. This could be as small as a residential flooding issue or water, quality need that they might have personally, like rain garden, small things, all the way up to working with municipalities and large DOT highway projects. The project that you see there in the picture is one of our schoolyards, greening playgrounds project where we're doing a lot of green infrastructure. Many of the projects over the past years have been in the way of just conveyance or water off of roadways with stream restoration, stream realignment, hydraulic analysis, culvert design, ditch design, and some water quality ponds. But more so, like 75 to 80% of our work today is focused on green infrastructure or green stormwater infrastructure. And so when you hear the words green infrastructure, if you're not in stormwater or water industry, that might ring a bell to something that might feel a little uncomfortable even today. And we'll talk about that in a little bit. So enough about me. Now I want to know more about you. If you don't mind, we have a couple of polls. And if you could please use your cursor and give us a little idea on where you are. So how long have you been in a water-related industry? Of 0 to 5, 5 to 10, 10 to 20, get an idea of who we're talking with today. And I'll give you a few minutes. And I asked somebody to sing the Jeopardy waiting song, but nobody wanted to volunteer for that. So if you have a good voice, sing it along as you're waiting in the background. I'm going to just take a note here. So if you don't mind me taking my time. Looks like a pretty equal number on the very earlies and then the very lates, and then a kind of a lower number in the center for the group, which is pretty fun because we're seeing people that have been around a long time like me, and then folks that are brand new to their field maybe. Thank you guys all for joining because this makes it a lot more interesting. Wish I could see you real time, but we can get to that in the Q&A potentially. All right, I am going to show you the results. Can I just display so that you see the same thing, and I hope you do. Next question, you're not done yet with your helping me out here, is over the past 30 years, which changes or events, if you've been around for that long, and if it's only 5 years, then tell me that as well, has made the largest negative financial impact on the work that you do or the work of water professionals in your opinion? And anytime, go ahead and go. And you can pick 2 of them. So if you think, oh, the recession was hard on me, COVID was hard on me, or if it was, any other 2, go right ahead and choose 2 if you like. See if we get more of a heat map in one area versus the other. And if we know 28% of our group was in the older folks like me, we'll get to see if they're going to feel the same kind of impacts that I felt over the years. I'm happy to see that only 8% is of the other, meaning possibly we're not missing a huge mark. Okay, we'll move on to the next question. Last question, then I'll let you relax and enjoy the show. What sector of the water industry fits your role? Are you in an agency, a municipal government, a grant funder, consultant, private, or other? And John, if it seems like I'm not showing the answers properly and you want to be able to show that for me, please do so. Look at us consultants out there. I can't cheer just for consultants because I've also been a municipal engineer, so kind of cheer for both categories. Could really be cheering for the grant funders because we want more of them guys at the table too. But all right, love it. Thank you guys for doing all that. Now, why that matters is I just want to have an idea as I'm talking about how this how these topics might apply to you and how we could, focus a little bit more of the conversation. I'm seeing municipal government and consultants being about 83% of our conversation today. So in my experience, I mentioned that I worked at a couple municipalities for a number of years. And then in 2002, I felt like I was in a unique spot, being like the first stormwater engineer in one of the cities and the second stormwater engineer in the second city. Both of them had been permitted by our state agency to become MS4s, municipally separated storm sewer systems, if you aren't sure of that acronym. That gave me some perspectives. And then also having worked for a city where, development happened a couple 150 years ago or so, completely paved the parts of the watersheds and then ended up having concrete lined channels. So loss of anything natural, any resiliency, any biodiversity. And I just didn't want to see that same thing happening in our surrounding areas that were like then farms going through urban sprawl. So felt that I could probably help those communities to develop smarter, be a part of development that gets done in the right way. That was all fine and good until the recession, 2007 and 8, that really stopped all future development or all development that was going on. So other businesses that were similar to mine were really hit hard. Same with us. Even the municipalities themselves were really feeling the pinch on this, because folks who were paying taxes and fees were now losing their homes. Homes are in foreclosures. Developments were stopping. There weren't fees coming in like they expected from all the new homes that were supposed to go in these new subdivisions. And so they were not also purchasing any other, products or services, because they had to tighten the belt as well. And yet environmental processes still remained. And in some cases, it looks like possibly even became more of a source of income for regulators. Like, we're not making money on tax side or fee side, and we have these folks kind of hanging around in the office. Let's send them out to all the development sites and issue citations because erosion control is not being maintained, because the development's kind of belly up and nobody's doing anything when it was halfway developed. And so that really even put more of a crunch on those developers, because now they're not developing and they're getting all these, fines, and, that's just a problem. Not that that's right or wrong. It just caused a little bit more of a crimp. So new development work halted. Many small engineering firms, competitors of ours, were out of business. According to SBA, 170,000 small businesses closed that year. And we needed to do something. So we saw the writing on the wall and we said, where? And so you might be thinking, how does this apply to me? I am not a company, I don't see how this relates at all. And I think where I'd like to see the connections connect for you is that my focus in my whole career has been about what I can do to create better water quality, reduced flooding, better community connectedness, and doing it myself as a municipal engineer, but then thinking I could do it on a broader scale with a company that hires people that are like-minded, and then we're all doing the same thing. So my focus at this point is keep that company going so that I can provide those services to improve our water quality and see, for my kids or grandkids or et cetera, that we have a better overall drinkable, swimmable, whatever situation in the future. So for us to say, oh, we're just going to close the doors, didn't feel like an option. I wanted to find other ways. And so I look around and I see DOT's still got funding. Federal funding was heading to the DOT to do, roadway improvements, and roadways create a lot of water, and water that may be running off right into the streams could use some water quality. So I started marketing to all of the firms in the area who were doing anything with roadways, and just really was fortunate to get into a team providing just their stormwater and water quality for a lot of freeway work. So kind of dodged that bullet. Very thankful that we were able to get through that, and saying, all right, we have this challenge. We have to think about a way to find a balance or to find a pivot to overcome that. Next situation, a couple of years later, we also were on a really great high-speed rail project where we're going to be designing ditches and culverts and things that are conveying water, as well as water quality, maintaining water quality where we have river crossings and things like that. The state had a large federal grant to do a high-speed rail, and a new governor came in 2010, and about 9 months after we started this project, and almost all of our staff are working on this project, 3-year contract, no need to be marketing because we don't need any additional work right now. We've got a 3-year contract and we're all happily working on it. One day we came in and they said, pack up your computers, today's your last day. The governor is not taking any more funding. They're going to close the project down. And now, so the people that I have working for me are going to be like not feeding their children the next week because we don't have any money to pay payroll. And that's just not going to happen. So again, kind of pull myself up by the bootstraps and look at what's out there, where can we find work, how do we keep our focus on our, our key focus has always been water quality. Where can we do that? And they also had this thing called resource efficiency policies, which means we want development to happen without all the red tape. Let's just let developers move forward and not tie their hands. And everyone cried, we're going to fill every wetland. We're going to destroy every stream as a result of that. And so, yeah, that was a little bit of a trying time. So again, and I had mentioned this first kind of bullet part, we are no longer doing work on that project, but we know that there's a really great wastewater agency in our community that is fee-based. And so they have a consistent revenue source. They also are kind of front runners in the country. They're known for really having some great insights on green infrastructure and doing things that have multiple benefits. And we really wanted to work with them. So I started talking to them like a crazy hungry person, and thankfully got a number of nice contracts with them to keep the staff working. And they've become our forever favorite client. And I'll say Milwaukee Metropolitan Sewage District, if you're listening, we love you. But that was another. Things don't look good. Let's find a way to make them good. The COVID crisis, everyone, probably who's here, the 0 to 5 year people, you are maybe in college or just starting a career. That's been a very trying time for everyone. For me as a business owner, a little bit of a different set of situations. Like I have to worry about definitely the health of my staff, the shelter in place policies and having to remote work. Clients not having the options for virtual networks. A lot of our clients were government that didn't have those kinds of networks set up at that point. And so they also didn't have their people who were in accounts payable at a place where they could make payments. So we weren't getting any receivables from those clients for some time, I would say 6+ months. Hard to make payroll when our clients are not paying. There's also a lot of psychological impacts, especially to some of our employees who had children. One had 4 kids who are having to be virtually homeschooled while she was also having to work from home. And you can just imagine the amount of chaos in her life trying to manage 4 kids and a dog and working from home. And, that is just a really difficult time to manage and to get through. We maybe weren't going to be working on certain projects because the world has closed those down for a bit, but there's also no way to network. Because we can't get together with folks like we used to say, hey, what do you have going on? How can we help your team? And so we were finding very few new projects. And I didn't want to lay anybody off, but they were open to having their hours reduced. So we went in that direction. And again, take a deep breath, think about what the challenges are that we're faced with, and how do we adapt and react. Be great if we could say we were proactive and we had thought about all these things in advance and we were ready for it. That really wasn't the case, except for we did have our virtual networks already set up in about 2019, I think. So that was fortunate for us. And I know many of you probably had that even before then, but we were able to work from home without any trouble. I had weekly check-ins with staff to talk about on a scale from 1 to 10, talk about where you are in terms of your mental well-being, your physical well-being, and then anything else that's going on in your life or work. And so everyone would take time to talk about how they feel, what's happening, are they going to be able to get through this? And I felt like it was really necessary to be able to give everybody almost a mini therapy time because they weren't seeing that anywhere else. I was teaching classes for a local agency for business capacity development. and we already had a virtual network set up for that. So we started doing some networking virtually, which helped to combat the no in-person virtual or networking opportunities. And then because of the staff hours being reduced, we really were focusing on what else can be done right now that we've been meaning to get to. What kind of housekeeping things, marketing, developing a better marketing plan, putting all the staff on various segments of the market, creating written processes that needed to be written, cross-training one another on areas of expertise, and anything else that really could be done to keep the wheels moving as soon as business came back. And although it was a real crunch financially, I think it helped to bolster us. And again, taking that, making a silk purse out of a sow's ear, one of my bosses used to say. It's kind of an old term, but I think that's really what we had tried to do with that. Now I'm looking forward at what could be a response, or a proactive maybe response to things that might be challenges now. And rather than being depressed or demoralized by things that we might be seeing, like how to take the opportunities to turn that around to being really great. Some of those challenges are those federal budget cuts, program changes. We keep hearing about deferred maintenance that's happening on all of our infrastructure across the country. We'll talk about that in a couple of minutes. Maybe regulations changing, maybe a worry that polluters are going to continue or start to pollute because they can. That might be a concern. Varying ideas or definitions on green initiatives, and the word green has gotten a bit of a negative connotation in certain demographics over the last few years. And then budget mindedness is a focus, and I think it should be a focus, and I think there's reasons for that we can talk about as well. So where do we find that balance? When federal spending declines, I think we've seen in the past that other spending may increase. We might see state and local spending increase. And here's just a couple of little examples. On the stormwater side, local municipalities may consider stormwater utility fees or transfer some responsibility they have taken on, say for managing private stormwater facilities, to being the responsibility of the actual owner of that facility rather than of themselves, which is a tax burden on the rest of the fee payers or taxpayers in that community. Increasing the use of low interest revolving loans for water projects, which are available. And then maybe private funders come to fill in the gaps. I think that we see when there is a topic out there that people are passionate about, you are already paying through your tax dollars, right? For things that you are really, whether or not you're agreeing to the paying, you're paying for it now. So if you see an interest in health of a stream and a fish population, or a certain community and greening that community or bringing more social activities to that community, I think we're going to find private donations, private funding to be ramping up to meeting those needs, or at least assisting in meeting those needs, because people's hearts are still there, and we're really the people who are paying for those bills after all anyway. So let's just put the money in a different bucket. A little bit more attention to asset management and maintenance on facilities. Doesn't really seem like it flows from the previous thing, but it's a really necessary part of water quality, that if you are allowing your facilities to decline, you might not care much about what's happening underground in that storm sewer, but as often as we have joint separation and we have sedimentation and things happening in there, all of that material is heading right downstream and will fill in the beds of the stream and the spawning areas more than, even development if it's not watched. So having a little bit more attention to maintenance, I think, is a very key part where we're going to want to create some focus. And then considering long-term asset management planning. To just build it and then forget it for a while is irresponsible. You wouldn't do that with your own home or buy a car without a maintenance program. So I'm not sure why we think that some of the facilities can have that. But to think about a long-term plan and be able to budget for that is just a more sustainable way of thinking long-term. And then a little bit on grant funding. Like I say, not an economist. I'm not a banker, anybody in that financial side. I'm just an engineer who's worked with a lot of these clients that have funding from various sources. And so these are just a smattering of what those sources might be. And there's a lot of information out there about how funding fluctuates all the time, constantly changing, constantly a different emphasis. So this report coming from the US EPA over the clean water funds, I mean, if you really look at this and you think about like political changes, it really does not correlate with definite political changes. You'll see ups and downs and rises and falls, you know, within certain presidencies. Similarly, when we look at the Congressional Budget Office on this nonpartisan analysis, here's a link in case you want to look more, but they did this report from 1956 through 2023 that shows us all kinds of bumps, all kinds of ups and downs and changes through all this infrastructure. And when we focus in really specifically to the water sides, a lot of money was spent early in the early 50s, in somewhat of the 70s, when a lot of new infrastructure was being built, when the country was really in a boom. And then it kind of trickles off. And so is then more like maintenance or just little bits and pieces of things are being added, but definitely looking like at a low point right now, or in 2023 anyway. And then when we look at the state and local spending, we're not on the same scale, so it's hard to tell how this compares to the feds, but we'll get there in a second. A little bit more sustainable and flat. I think water specifically, when you think about water utilities in general, water is local. Water is a local problem with local solutions, and you're going to be spending money locally on it. So with water utilities, it makes sense that there's going to be more of a flat line. And then when we compare that to the federal versus the local and state spending, you can see how, you know, the graphs rise and fall, but generally the state and local pieces 3 times, you know, the federal section. So when there's a lot of changes on the federal side, I don't think we have to be as concerned that we're losing everything. You know, some of the themes that I hear is like, you know, pretty bleak from certain groups. And I feel like it's not as bleak when we look at, kind of break it down. So then similarly, when we're talking about O&M, I think it's a pretty curious bunch of curves that the O&M on the capital expenditures kind of greatly outweigh the O&M on highways, but really that's it. The rest of it, the bottom, the blue line is the O&M side, and the top is the capital. The purple line is the capital. The water utilities are really seeing a lot more O&M than capital. And we could have conversation about why we think that is, and if that O&M is actually O&M, or is it more like a water main is broken and we're going to go out and repair it? Is that really a proactive approach to spending on that, or is this really a reactive type of an approach? We could converse about that later if you like. And then we're going to break it down to public spending by type of government. Again, kind of looking at the state and local being the light blue. And when we zoom in on water, there's a lot more state and local spending on water facilities, on water resources, than really what you're seeing coming from the federal budget. All that talk about O&M is bringing me to the thought about our friends at the American Society of Civil Engineers, and they do an annual infrastructure report card. This just came out within the last few weeks, and kind of excited to see that we finally got a score of C, which is kind of hard when you're a bunch of A students and you want to see A's and B's, and we're really excited to see a C score. But that's actually the best grade that we've received across all of these categories since 1998. And a lot of this is attributed to the American Infrastructure Investments Jobs Act, with $1.2 trillion that was dedicated over 5 years. But still, our poor little stormwater is at a D, and drinking water C-, waterways C-, levees D+, wastewater D+. We have a long way to go, guys. And is this because we have installed and not maintained these facilities, or have we had a lot larger use than what these were intended for? Is probably a good mixture. And I have not dug into every single detail of the study to be able to tell you all that, but I think it's important to see from my perspective, we spent a lot of money or we dedicated a lot of money and we saw some improvement. And so we're all like, yay, don't cut that money because it's getting us somewhere. Although on the other side of the scale are reports like we're also seeing Amtrak's Inspector General believing 10% of the funds that they're receiving is being lost through fraud or unlawful actions or schemes. And we don't want that either. Again, this is all our hard-earned money going out to the government to pay for these facilities, unless we're going to talk about deficit. We're not going to go into that topic. But just in the terms of if we're spending the money on something, we want to be responsible for how we're spending. And so when we see a little bit of pushback, I feel like it's healthy because it is bringing us balance. It's making us think there's good in spending, but there's good in checking, and the checks and balances are healthy, and it brings us again to that balance. And everything in balance, right? Everything in moderation. You're told that with everything from the food you eat to your exercise, what have you. When we talk about maintenance on AQUALIS, we use this slide a lot. You can see on the left, and I can't show you with my pointer, but I'll say that tall bar on the left of both graphs is your initial investment into the infrastructure. And when you spend that money and you don't maintain it, then you have a run to fail investment method. So you're going to spend the money and then just let it drop off, like kind of let the thing fail after 10, 20, 30, whatever years. And then a lighter blue bar on the right side of that one is indicating spending that money again and then some because of inflation. So you're constantly doing this, build it, let it fail, build it, let it fail, and versus having an investment method on the right side of build it and maintain it. The little green line at the bottom is intending to be what's your O&M budget, that it's similar every year. You're going to plan this out. You're going to manage your assets in a responsible fashion so that the things that we built in the 50s and 70s, according to that first graph, they're maintained over the course of all these years by incrementally looking, inspecting, checking, understanding the system, the life cycle, and spending the money on making that stuff happen. This seems like this is not even related. How is this a part of the water balance? Well, I'll get there. And how do we find a balance in our environmentally focused fields? So one thing I want to say is let's focus on what you know. What is your expertise? What does your heart tell you that we need to be doing? And then determine how those things that you know well, your products, your services, etc., can make sense for everybody. And you're going to find a win-win if you think about it long enough. If it's good for the environment, it also needs to make financial sense in order for everyone to be on the same page with that. I don't believe there's anybody out there who would say, I don't care about clean air, I don't care about clean water. Everybody cares about it. They just want to make sure that we're doing it in a way that also makes sense for their bottom line, that we're not being wasteful. And I can appreciate that. So challenge yourself in every conversation to put on the other pair of shoes and say, what is in it for me from their perspective? And if it's a bottom line thing, and you can have a conversation with them and say, what's important to you about this? And how can we find a meeting ground? I think that's what's going to be necessary. So I want to give a couple examples of that. This one is kind of a, kind of a dumb example maybe about a personal experience. I don't want to get into a debate about whether or not solar energy makes sense and whether electric vehicles make sense, but consider that last year I decided to put solar on my house. There is a 30% tax credit, so it makes the ROI look a lot sweeter. And we have an issue in our neighborhood with a lot of power outages. So I thought, a little independency from the grid and worrying about power outages, a little bit of a 30% tax credit. If there is a real plus for using solar power, I'm feeling good and green about it by doing that. But at the same time, it makes financial sense because of these credits and the power outages. And then if I buy an electric vehicle and I can plug in and charge on a sunny day for free, then I don't have to spend money on gas and go to the gas stations and waste that 15 minutes every week or whatever it is. And I feel like that's a win. So to me, if you can do something that's green and you can make something make sense financially, I think you're going to find a connection with people on all sides of, on both sides of the aisle anyway. And I want to give you that example for green infrastructure. So to us, green 20 years ago, maybe, as a way to say it's not gray infrastructure. It's not pipes and concrete and that type of thing. It's something that's a little bit more, looks maybe more like nature. And so we're going to say it looks green. Green is also Green New Deal and green initiatives, and green to some people means wasting my money. And that could be true, but we want to make a case on how what is good for water quality is also good for your financial bottom line. So let's look at permeable pavements for commercial use. They may have a longer life cycle versus traditional concrete or asphalt pavement. And why that is because they won't require chip sealing, crack sealing, milling and overlaying, which is cost. They also don't, we're in a northern climate, so when water drains into them, if they're built properly and there's enough subsurface drainage, they're not going to freeze. So they're not going to usually heave and cause cracks. If there are cracks, that would just be in the joint between the two pavers, and they settle back down in the spring. So we don't have to worry about all that movement that might happen in traditional pavement. They don't require as much de-icing, salt and chemicals, so you're going to save a little money there. Because when the sun comes out after a snowy day, it melts a lot of that and it drains down in through the pavement rather than ponding across the pavement and having to be salted so it doesn't refreeze. So right now it dries it out, it drains away, you don't have to salt it, you're saving money on salting. You may be also saving money on snow removal unless it's a really big snowstorm. And if you do have a requirement for stormwater management because it's new development, you have your stormwater management and your parking lot is going to be done in the same footprint. So it's not like you're wasting land to have a pond over there and a parking lot over there. You're doing it all in the same place. That seems like wins all around. Like, who could say no to all that stuff? Yes, it is a little bit more expensive to install. It might need a little different type of maintenance, but once you get into the routine, that's not a big deal either. And if you were going to put in a parking lot because you just need a new one, not because it's new development, you might be able to get a stormwater utility fee credit up to like 60% of your total bill knocked off by going through the process. And so if that gets you, $5,000 or $10,000 back at the end of each year, or you just don't pay it actually, well, who can say no, right? So that's the kind of thing is like, think about the objective. And if your objective is finding better water quality or finding better air quality or whatever your point is, how can we make something also make financial sense so it doesn't feel wasteful? And then the word green doesn't have to feel like a wasteful word. Similarly, with bioretention and roadways, you might say, I don't want to see these things all over the place. To me, that just looks like a waste of money. Why don't we just put it in a pipe and get rid of it? This will give you more capacity to your existing gray infrastructure. Storm sewers were designed largely in cities 100 years ago. They were meant for a 5 or 10-year storm event. You have a larger, higher intensity, shorter duration storms now in most cities than what we had 100 years ago. And so they're not even keeping up with those smaller storms, much less what happens to your city during a 100-year event. If you have a mid-block sag or if you have a low point somewhere, it's going to pond, it's going to flood, and green infrastructure will be a way to soften the blow on that. So it's going to also be easy to see when it needs maintenance. There's going to be trash collecting in there, which is a good thing because that's what they're meant for. So people will say, I don't like seeing all the trash. Well, then let's pick it up. Instead of being down in the lake or the river, it's good to be able to collect it there like a filter and then remove it from that point. It's not something you can ignore because it's on the surface. Many of the other benefits that are come along with having this green infrastructure is improved property values, reduced heat island effect, adding to biodiversity in your community, adding local, possibly GI maintenance jobs. There's a whole smattering of co-benefits that you could try to debate, but they've been pretty well researched that are really positives that you get to add by just, not having a storm sewer, by instead adding some green infrastructure. It also helps the community meet their MS4 and TMDL needs. If you know those acronyms, you know what I'm talking about. It's creating locations where water quality can be provided without a whole lot of additional investment. You don't have to buy an undeveloped property and put in a giant pond. wasting kind of the purchase price and the maintenance of that when you already own your city right of ways and you can install something like this. And also with just a small incremental increase in cost from the standard design for water quality, you can get a 100-year event storage out of your bioswale or your bioretention. So just a little deeper subsurface storage or a little wider storage under the pavement. And that little rain garden or bioswale now gives you a little more resiliency for those changing weather patterns. So to me, it feels like, how could I argue with that? It seems like all of the numbers should make sense then when we compare the cost of just increasing conveyance or increasing gray infrastructure to the benefits you get out of this little guy. It should be I think it should be a win-win. And so, yes, I encourage you to find that balance, be in the other person's shoes, and think about the positives that we can see, ensuring I'm talking about maintenance again, ensuring that longevity of their assets, preventing a large outlay. I go back to maintenance a lot because the earlier graph where we see a lot of funds are being spent on maintenance. That means, maybe it's not going to be a new project, but maybe it's a way to look at different aspects of maintenance. That the graph that shows us this run to fail investment versus maintenance method should make us think a little bit more about preventing things like sinkholes, sewer backups, embankment failures on a pond, flooding that would happen downstream if you're not maintaining. You wouldn't believe how we did a seminar a few months ago about stormwater facility maintenance and how many communities are not even looking at them. They have them build it as a part of new development, and they say they have a maintenance agreement, but no one is asking and nobody is looking. So if there's a failure there, that was a bit of wasted money because now you're going to cause more damage downstream. So you need to be looking at these things. We also are preventing downstream sedimentation. I mentioned that before. By keeping the gray infrastructure working, we're not allowing a sinkhole to take half a parking lot and throw it in the river, right? You might even find new favor from some of the unexpected groups like fishermen or hunting groups that are in your community. And thinking a little bit more about how to balance. So when you are looking at putting money away for your retirement, people are like, have a diversified portfolio for your investments. I say the same thing about have a diversified client base. Try to not work only with one client. That might be something you know offhand, but thinking about all different types of clients and ones that might be more aligned to your mission, that care more about water quality, long-term good investments that are going to be sustainable, etc. And then look at where are projects happening so that you're not finding yourself out of work. If you are in a field that you're seeing a lot of cuts being made, it might be a time to reinvent yourself or stand back and say, what is my actual dream job and where might I want to go that I can work on a project or with a program that really hits on my interests and would also still have some funding. And the asset management and maintenance. We did a GI plan for the entire city of Green Bay, Wisconsin a couple of years ago, and looking at where, if we were installing green infrastructure across the entire city, what would be the most strategic places to hit on multiple objectives of water quality, of flood resiliency, in places where there could be new development, et cetera. And then as the city develops and their capital improvement program is projected, like where there is a water main project and it's in the great spot for new green infrastructure, let's get out there and get them done together. So let's pre-plan that stuff and helping your clients think about more forward. I say to stay ahead of these emerging issues. It's not really a part of today, but just be mindfully thinking about what is coming next. I think that's something that you want to keep in the background is like, what are the ways to combat some of the things that we're going to be seeing as we go forward. So with that, I really thank you for listening, for being such a good audience, because of course you can't say a whole lot back right now. no matter where you are, I encourage you to not be dismayed by whatever might be happening in your economy, with your politics, with a crisis that may happen in the future. Just keep focused on what you feel is important. And I think that you need to look to find common ground with others so that you can be on the same page, to have a conversation about what matters to them and what matters to you, and find your commonalities versus always looking at what we have as differences between different groups. And use that opportunity to as a pivot point or a point to find balance and forge a new path for yourself. Water is often local. It's often a local problem. Most of the times when we're dealing with water, it's because we have a local flood or we have local streams in a bad spot. And so that means that we also have local solutions. And the best thing you can do is get super involved in your local community. And I almost would say put your head in the sand about the things that go on federally, because locally is where you can really make a difference. Even if it's just a beach cleanup or a river cleanup, you're getting out there, you're talking to people about why these things matter, and you're putting your efforts into things that can make a big difference where you're at. And if we're all doing that same thing, we're going to all be in a much better spot. And that is all I have for you. And I open it up to questions or conversation. Thanks, Katie.
Thanks so much, Carrie. Yeah, we have a couple questions that came in, so we will just jump right in. How do I find balance when my job or position in an environmental field was cut from a federal budget?
That's a good question. And that is, so I've never worked from the federal perspective, and I am sorry if that has affected you and that's what you're dealing with right now. But I wonder too, is that really the dream job that you always had? And maybe that's the case for some people. I guess I've never been like, oh, I really want to work for EPA when I grow up. But is there a different dream job that you might have? And if you have a passion and you have a knowledge, you've been educated, you have experience, I'm thinking that there's a really great spot for you in another entity, whether it's a private or a local government agency, to take that time to say, what do I really want? And how do I turn this into a positive to revamp my, market myself to someone else that I think will be a much better fit? And then you feel locally connected. So I feel like if you're working on a large scale like that, you don't feel like you're really connected right into the communities that you're working with when you're at a bigger scale. So you could, put yourself in a spot where you're actually really a valued piece of the community, and it's not going to be so easy to let you go next time.
All right, next. How does it appear from one graph that we are spending more on O&M of water facilities than we are on new projects, yet ASCE's score for water is still between a D and a C minus?
Can I go back to the graph about how does it appear that one graph we're spending more on O&M and water facilities? Okay, I think that's this graph. Is that correct? You see that graph that says water utilities on the right side, Katie?
Yeah, I think that's right. Yep.
Okay. So I am not sure about this. I would like to say, I'd like other opinions even to come in. But what I think would happen, and from my very short time of working for the water utility department in one of the cities I worked for, is that I see a lot more reaction than proactivity in the way of like water main replacement or facility replacement. And so I think the big outlay for some of those things was many years ago. And I mean, even 100 plus years ago in some cases. And then the maintenance is really just, we have a water main break, let's get out there and replace it. Rather than having full scale analysis, knowing that your entire water network is on a GIS system, an asset management system, where you can be looking at knowing the certain type of pipe or the certain year of installation might have been a problem, and selectively replacing them as they go rather than just a knee-jerk reaction on the water utilities. Because it does feel a little bit off balance that ASCE gives the water utilities such a poor score, and yet so much money is being spent on maintenance versus on capital outlay. So that's really my only big guess on why that is happening, but I would really like to hear from others if somebody else thinks that there's other answers to that one.
Sure. All right. Industrial stormwater, as you know, derives from precipitation and or runoff that comes in contact with industrial manufacturing and processing. Many IUs are tackling stormwater issues differently. Can you expand on this?
I am not really sure exactly about what's the tackling them differently. I guess I would have to say, tell me those examples of how they're tackling them. I mean, you're exactly right that industrial permitting is about what's coming in contact with stormwater and how they're looking at it differently. I guess I'd have to have more examples on what those are.
Okay, no worries. For permeable paver systems, do you recommend testing the pavers? Is that an area of work that could be of service to paver system owners?
Yeah, some communities actually require that you do an infiltration test to prove that it's still functioning the way that it was designed to function. And I don't remember the numbers exactly, but it's something like 5 times greater infiltration is provided in the system than what you actually can get because of the amount of rainfall you would actually get. We don't get 100 inches per hour ever in rainfall, and yet that's what the pavement can actually take on. So a lot of the communities are requiring that you do a test before you're able to confirm that that paver system is working. And yeah, I definitely think it's a service. And I think there are companies, little small companies out there that are saying, hey, I can do that testing for you. So
Okay.
it's definitely a good call.
Awesome. Okay. How do you get elected officials to get themselves out of the way or work with them when it comes to taking on initiatives that will cost constituents who are developers money?
I think education is the key. I think it's easy to have an opinion when you're sitting across the keyboard screen or, monitor from someone else. But when you get in the same room and you talk with them about what some of the issues are that you see, and then also ask them what's important to them and try to find that middle ground, like I mentioned before. Asking them to get out of the way is probably tricky because you have to use some psychology and what appeals to them versus asking them to move. But if they are, asking them the questions about what matters to them before you try to force your thoughts on them, I think you find what's common between you. And maybe their initiative about the developers is really they don't want to see the waterway ruined or the neighborhood changing or something about the demographics moving out of that community, but maybe there's a win-win between the developers plan and the elected officials plan. There's a reason they were elected, and
Sure.
usually it's because they had some really great ideas that the public wants to see portrayed. So getting to be pals with them and having a nice conversation, I think, is always going to help.
Okay, well, it looks like that's all we have for today. So, Carrie, thank you so much. I did want to mention that today's session was recorded and it'll be available on the Stormwater Solutions website within the next week for on-demand viewing. You'll also be notified by email when the archive is available. And for your certificate of attendance today, please allow for up to 24 hours for that to hit your inbox. So that concludes our presentation for today. Carrie, thank you so much. And then on behalf of Stormwater Solutions, I want to thank Carrie and AQUALIS for sponsoring today's event, and of course, all of you for joining. So have a great afternoon, everybody.
Thank you, Katie.